Hey everyone. Please support what I do to help keep Greyhawk alive by subscribing to the channel. Also, please consider becoming a channel member to get early access to videos, exclusive live chats, quarterly adventure modules, and more. Thanks, and enjoy the show. So, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks is one of the favorite old modules of a lot of gamers, and I thought I'd talk about it today on Greyhawk Broadcast. Now, I just want to preface this by saying a lot of people in the comments seem to get frustrated by my retrospectives on these modules because I'm not talking about the module a as a gaming module, right? I'm talking about its place in the lore. So just be aware that is the focus of this channel and that is the focus of this video. So if you're here looking for a review of how to play this module, you will be disappointed. If you're looking for how this module impacts Greyhawk lore, that hopefully you will like this video. Um, Now, a lot of people don't really, there's a central question about this module that a lot of people get wrong. And that is the monsters, because I've seen online in various places the idea that the spaceship, because for those who don't know, the idea is the module is there's a buried part of a spaceship in the mountains, and the PCs go there to destroy whatever is causing these periodic appearances of weird monsters. Um, and a lot of people online seem to have the impression that part of the mission of the spaceship was to capture specimens, and that's how all these D&D monsters end up in the spaceship. And that is not the case. If you read the text carefully, I'm getting rid of this because I don't need the whole module to do this. Um, the idea, first of all, is that the spaceship is not a complete spaceship. It is only part of the spaceship that found its way to Greyhawk. So it is like a module of a spaceship, and the modules were broken apart due to a plague to stop the spread of the plague. And this particular module landed in the Barrier Peaks. It says here in the introductory material. Sometime else, a large exploration colonization expedition of human origin was overtaken in the course of its journey by a deadly plague. In a vain effort to halt the spread of the virus, the modular sections of the vessel were sealed and then separated, each left to its own fate. The section concerned here was drawn through a black hole and spewed into the universe where the world of Greyhawk fantasy setting exists. Chance brought it to that very planet, and its computers and robotics brought it to an intact landing. Process, however, caused an earth tremor and a landslide buried the ship for several decades. So that's the setup, right? The spaceship was here for has been here for decades. Then there was another earthquake that opened up a one of the hatches, right? So the computer decided, oh, we have to get rid of some of the cargo, and the cargo was monsters that were held in stasis. We'll get to that in a second. And as the module states. Um, the holds contained various alien fauna and flora, and the offloading freed these creatures from stasis. Some died immediately, some lived for a time, and a few species prospered and propagated. So, right there, we know that some of the creatures that we see in the world of Greyhawk, and presumably in the D&D game in general, came from the spaceship. They are actually the alien flora and fauna that was released and flourished in the planet. Um, and then recently, another earthquake uncovered an upper airlock, and the tremor really caused the same computer malfunction. So the worker robots once again cleared the lower cargo deck and periodically discharged more of the unwanted goods. So basically, what we're seeing is there's a bunch of alien creatures in stasis, and the robots are periodically tossing them out the airlock, and this is causing all this weirdness to happen in the mountains. So the so the local lords, the Grand Duchy of Geoff, have been recently plagued by a rash of unusually weird and terrible monsters of unknown sort. The western area, particularly the mountain fastness which separates the Grand Duchy from the dry steppe, has long been renowned for the generation of the most fearsome beasts, and it has been shunned accordingly, save for so basically, there are weird new monsters coming, and they're coming from the spaceship. And um, The question is, which monsters are the new ones? I think there's a couple of options in here for monsters, which we saw in the Monster Manual 2, and that with the Fiend Folio, that that came after the Monster Manual, that in the world of Greyhawk um, canon came from this spaceship. And I think it's illustrative to note that there are only two kinds of monsters listed in the who have full write-ups in the module, and those are Vegapygmies and Rotten. And I would argue that those are two monsters that made their way from the alien worlds into the world of Greyhawk. Um, there are a couple other candidates too, which I'll get to in about a second. Um, but before we continue with the with the monsters, it's really neat. There are a few interesting bits of lore about Joff, which is normally you don't see a lot of info on. Um, Choosing several of his doughtiest henchmen to lead the expedition, he, the Grand Duke of Joff, called upon the other powers of the state to likewise furnish their minions for the expedition as well. Thus, the Society of the Magivestre, which is, I guess, magic users, the Fellowship of the Blinding Light, which would be lawful good clerics who follow Foltis, the god of blinding light, the Magsman Brotherhood, which is the Thieves Guild, because Magsman is a one of the level titles for thieves in first edition. And the High Lord of Elvendom at Hokove also selected the bravest of adventurers and equipped them accordingly to accompany the expedition as their representatives. Da, da, da. So we're getting these kind of neat organizational notes about how Joff is organized. There's the Thieves Guild has a different name. We know that there are the lawful good clerics. Foltis are predominant, and which is something you don't really see in a lot of other material, and also that the League of Magivestri, which is it the League, the Society of Magivestri, which is just a wonderful, wonderfully evocative title. Also has is an organization in Joff, which I always love those little details when you get to know, okay, what is this called? What is that called? We know that they exist, but it's nice to have a name to hang on them. Now, one thing about that idea that the Foltis is one of the predominant religions is kind of interesting because in the guide we have the regional alignments, and for Joff it lists neutral good, chaotic good, and true neutral as the predominant alignments. So I gotta wonder why. Uh, we have that Brotherhood of the Blinding Light, which is Foltis, who's a lawful good, lawful neutral deity, that skirts the line there, in a land where those are not the predominant alignments of the people. Maybe that speaks to kind of a disconnect between the leadership of the Grand Duke and the rest of the people. Maybe it's one of those situations where, the people like some other deities, but the Duke has been converted to the worship of Foltis, and thus the official religion is that, but the people's religion is something else. It'd just be an interesting idea to kind of play with if you ever did something really detailed in Joff. Now, we've noted how the monsters can come out of the spaceship, right? We've seen that periodically the robots clear out things that were in stasis out of the cargo holds and they dump them outside. There's a wonderful illustration of this happening uh, in the illustration book here. Yeah, the artwork, especially by Earl Otis, is just fantastic in this. So we see this bulette being tossed out of the cargo hold by the robots, and so you can see even the expression on the bulette's face. It's just like I'm asleep and I'm being tossed out of a cave. I don't know what's going on. It's very very cool. Um, but we've seen how the things come out, but that doesn't explain how regular D&D monsters can get in. But we do have that answer, and it is the same way that the PCs get into the thing. Um, The expedition is just top to the rise, yada yada. Um, there's a small upper door and a large lower cargo hatch, which will open only when the party is inside. Um, whenever the party approaches for the first time, the small door will be open. It will remain open for six full turns, 1 hour. It will then close for 20 hours and then reopen for another six turns. So this is how monsters could get into the spaceship. Not only when the robots are tossing creatures at the cargo hold, because obviously the door has to be open then, and something could get in. Um, that's less likely. But if you have the small cargo door open, it's open for an hour every 20 hours, every 21 hours. So it's very possible that something could wander in exactly the same way that PCs can enter the spaceship. So that explains how other D&D monsters could get in. There's also several instances of psionic-based monsters like mind flayers and intellect devourers and things like that who get into the spaceship and then are trapped by its force fields. Like they can't use body projection or whatever their etherealness or they can't turn astral because of the force field surrounding the spaceship. So they're trapped inside. So you get this idea that there's also anything that's ethereal. I think there's a Shidu. There's a pair of Shidu who also are trapped that way. So you can get in using psionics or magic, but then you're trapped within. So there's that too, and they make it plain that that's what happened. So you have these things coming in and going out. Now, in terms of the other monsters, it's very interesting because, as I noted, the only two monsters that have full write-ups in the back of the module are the Vegapygmies and the Russet Mole. However, there are other monsters who make their first appearance here. There are web birds. There are a bunch of there's a number of other things that are in here, and but, uh, it's it's uh, it's up to I it's unclear whether or not those are creatures that were on the ship and escaped into the D&D world, or if they were from the D&D world and entered into the ship. However, there are some places where um, it's very clear that these things were brought in from outside. That is especially true on level 4, the botanical gardens, the rookery, and the menagerie. Basically, um, these this level was meant for the entertainment of the crew and the passengers and the colonists on the ship. So these monsters and creatures came from somewhere else and were already on the ship before the plague hit and before it was broken up. So you had these are absolutely, we know these are alien monsters because were they were here in the menagerie. You've got things like the Aurum Vorax, uh, leechoids, which you don't see in D&D in the rule books, but you do see the Aurum Vorax. There's a whole section of deadly plants, many of which you don't see, but there are triflower fronds, snapper saws. Um, there's the wolf in sheep's clothing. Those are things that you do see in later on, and that makes me think that they were alien creatures who did escape and thrive, as we saw in the introduction. But you see some things in here that are just they don't all they get is a stat block, like baboonoids, um, or what else here? We got uh, there's like fish and the wolf in sheep's clothing. There's the froghemoth, which is another one that made its first appearance here, but curiously it doesn't get a full write-up. It's just a stat block here. There's no entry in at the back where the rest of the monsters are, which is really puzzling. You get all the devices and the powered armor and just those couple of monsters. Uh, I'm guessing because the Vegapygmies in particular, they have a social organization that needs to be described and so forth. And I guess because they had the separate illustration book, they were probably a little stressed for space, so they wanted to keep things low. But I guess if they hadn't had that illustration book, we might have had this module with a separate monster book, like we saw with S4, the Caverns of Sajkov. Um, but you get to see all these things that we know were in the menagerie and thus came from outside. and there's the vampire thorns, um, and I guess that's it. There's like I say, there's various things in here that we don't see. Leechoids. There's something called boring grass, which is like corkscrews that bore into your skin. Lizardoids and so forth. There's definitely um, a mix of things that only thrive in the spaceship and things that obviously escaped outside. So in terms of the Greyhawk lore, that is where I see things happening with the monsters. We have some obvious examples of things that came in from outside. In some cases, it explicitly says that's what happened. Um, but we don't know what things we know some things obviously came from outside and went to D&D, but there's a few cases in there where if you wanted to, you could have that boring grass thriving all over your campaign, and that's the kind of thing I love. I think there's not nearly enough deadly plants in the game. But there's lots of ways you can go with that, and there's some explicit clues in the text that tell you which. Now, in terms of the technology, I've made videos before about how Greyhawk is in kind of like has this lost golden age where things were higher technology, but we don't really know that whether or not that technology was native to Earth or did it come from outside. One of the problems here is that it's difficult to make a straight connection between the technological items in the module. You've got lasers, you've got scanners, and so forth, and some of the more technologically associated items that are in the Dungeon Master's Guide, in like the artifacts and relics. So like the Machine of Loom the Mad and stuff like that, the Mighty Servant of Luick O, and so forth. There's not a straight line between these items and those items. So it's difficult to say, well, oh, obviously those came from the same universe as the spaceship. Um, it is thematically the same because you're seeing technology brought into the fantasy world. But in terms of, oh, we can see that this is obviously derived from the same source as those, the descriptions don't really match. It's just the way they're used doesn't match. So I would say that there's not really a lot of justification for saying it. I mean, obviously, in your own campaign, you can say, "Oh, yes, obviously, the Machine of Loam the Mad came from the same universe that this came from, maybe a scout ship or something, thousands of years ago." But there's no it doesn't flow all that well from the way these things are described and the way those things are described. So yes, technology is definitely known, but it's viewed more as just another kind of magic. And especially when you see the fact that like gunpowder doesn't work, that I think that's a good way to approach it in the world of Greyhawk. So there we are. We've got some neat little insights into Geoff. The disconnect between the religion, and we got the names of some of the organizations and so forth. We've got the idea about the monsters coming and going in and out of the spaceship. Some of them originated from another world and thrived. Some came from Greyhawk from Earth and entered into the spaceship. The technology seems not to be compatible, and thus I wouldn't make it. I wouldn't make any connections. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on my musings here. Have you ever used the module in your own game? I know this is a very popular thing to run at conventions and so forth. So do let me know your thoughts on the module down in the comments. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later.
Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.